So we'll have the question answer session after the second speaker. So Dr. Harbishettar will be the second speaker and will be introduced by Dr. Good evening all.
My task is has been made easy. So this is from the perspective of editor. When I say editor, as an editor, when you publish the paper, mostly when I say editor, it means also from perspective of the peer reviewers. Also maybe from the perspective when somebody is actually reading your paper and reviewing it or using it for any clinical purposes in the future. So I follow this lady, Dr. Trisha Greenag, who has written this book on how to read a paper. That's a basic one. So what she says about systematic review, I'll skip the first two because that has been covered. The last one mainly. Although the meta-analysis can increase the precision of the result, it's important that to ensure that the methods used for the reviewer were valid and reliable. So that's very important how the method has been followed. People, when they start doing research, they look for some results. They have this some hypothesis in mind. This is going to, for example, yoga is going to work in cognitive issues in schizophrenia, and this person starts with a notion that it's going to work and is going to get positive results. And then in the end, when he does the meta-analysis, it doesn't find any improvement, or it doesn't find any difference with the placebo. So then he gets very disheartened and feels that his paper is not going to get published, or that's not going to be very useful. What he has to understand is how he has conducted this meta-analysis or the systematic review. That is more important than the results. So that's a basic thing here. So there are two parts to systematic reviews, or the systematic review with meta-analysis. Conducting the review, how do you conduct the review? That's been covered. Then writing a report, that's more important. So what the editors will see or the peer reviewers will see is what you have submitted. So we believe that you're going to give a good summary of how hard you worked, or what are the areas and how meticulously you followed the guidelines. That's more important. So again, going by Trisha's, when you have the paper in front of you, these are the areas. Of course, that's a basic question. The first one is basic question, is a clinical question important, that's been addressed. Then you have this was a thorough search done in all the appropriate databases. I'll come to that in a minute. And then were all potentially important sources explored. How far you've gone, that's more important. Then the question number 3 is was methodological quality assessed and trials were weighted accordingly? That's part of your meta-analysis, forest plot and other things. Then how sensitive are the results to the way the review has been done? Have the numerical results been interpreted with caution, with common sense and due regard to broader aspects of the problem? You have this checklist for data sources, how far you can go. Medline database, this is Cochrane database, there is PubMed, there is PsycInfo, Embase. You go on, there are so many databases. Then it's important to know how far you've gone, how many databases you've used. There's no point going into several databases also, but that has to have some common sense there. Cochrane will mainly have RCTs, so if there are RCTs, you shouldn't try and miss Cochrane. But being in India now, I think we have difficulty in accessing Cochrane. That's going to be difficult. So even the editors will be aware of this problem. Then foreign language literature, are you restricted only to English? Papers only published in English. If the authors have done it, that they have decided to go for only English, have they explained the reason why they have only gone for English? Why not other languages? Is there a reason? So it's all about justifying. Then grey literature, again grey literature, there is a whole area one has to explore. Then references, then references of references of references, references of references of references, and go on and on. So how far you can go? Then other any were there attempts made to look for any unpublished sources. So this is again explained by the authors in their methodology. That section will be looked for how far this person has gone and checked, and if for some reason this paper is not available, have they written to the authors of that paper, have they followed it up, and how far you've gone. That's more important. There is a tool to assess the methodological quality or the bias assessment for the systematic reviews. Fortunately, recently I was involved in one, so I am aware of this. We applied in at least 10 studies, so we are aware of how it works. So the simple questions, this has several domains. Did the research question and inclusion criteria for the review include components of PICO, that is the population, intervention, comparator, and outcome? The next thing is, did the report of the review contain explicit statement that review methods were established prior to the conduct of the review, and did the report justify any significant deviations from the protocol? So there is a protocol that is published for example, in Prospero, and then you set out and do it, and then you prepare you conduct and finish the systematic review, and then you prepare a report. And when the report is ready, was the report in line with whatever has been registered as a protocol in under Prospero? And trust me, the peer reviewers will look into the Prospero. It's available in the public domain. Now, while I'm saying this, I'll also mention that one needs to be aware that when you register in Prospero, all the authors' names are available there, and the peer reviewers will have access to the authors. It's usually understood that the same authors will also be the authors for when this report is submitted. The double blinding may not happen here, but at least single blinding can happen. So we believe that that kind of single blinding won't have any bias, because the editors will be aware of this. And the next thing is, did the review authors explain their selection of the study design for inclusion in the review? Was there a detailed inclusion criteria? Was it mentioned? Then did the review authors use comprehensive literature search strategies? Like I mentioned, I'll tell you what. In this, for example, for partial yes, all of the following: searched at least 2 databases relevant to the research question, provided keyword and search strategy, justified publication restrictions language. So searched reference lists, like I mentioned, reference of references, and then searched trial registries, included consulted content experts in the field. Have they written to any experts in the field? Then where relevant, have they searched any grey literature? Then they conducted the search within the 24 months of completion of the review. So that much is expected. The method, the guideline expects that much robustness. Did the review authors perform study selection in duplicate, which means that for example, while screening, for example, I'll tell you what, in February, Nuance had this Covidence software, and we started using it. And fortunately, when we searched in, let's say, Medline, PubMed, and PsycInfo, we were able to, download a kind of a file that was uploaded into the Covidence software. The Covidence software would automatically remove the duplicates and give us the final number, and then it is moved to the screening, where 2 authors will get access to do the screening, and each one of them will not know whether the person has said yes or no, and then the third person, where there is discrepancy, will know, the third author, and the third author will resolve the discrepancy. So it's straightforward. Fortunately, this used to be very tedious exercise in the past. Now with Covidence, we are lucky, so I think we will be able to use it. Then once the screening through the title and the abstract is done, the next step is the full text review. Fortunately, this Covidence will pull out the full text PDF of all the papers which is publicly available. The ones that are difficult to access, we will have to find ways of getting it and upload. So the what I'm trying to say here is basically two authors will do the screening. Then the next step is the eligibility assessment, looking at the whole paper, the whole PDF paper, then inclusion exclusion, and then the third stage, the assessment of bias is also done by two authors independently. In all the three cases, two authors, it can be different authors, but two authors do independently. The third author, and they will be independent, and the third author will do the resolving of the conflict, or if there's difficulty to find a third author, probably they could have mentioned in the protocol that they will be resolving the discrepancies or disagreements by getting into some kind of consensus. So the protocol, when they are writing, they should be careful that you need to be open a bit, saying that either by consensus or by third author. So that's how I would recommend that they should have registered in the Prospero protocol. Did the authors perform data extraction in duplicate? Again, data extraction also, they expect that it needs to be done by two authors separately. And then did the review authors provide a list of excluded studies with justification for exclusion? Now there are 20, for example, out of 50 final papers, 40 were excluded. When you're excluding by looking into examining the whole paper, the whole PDF paper, the authors or the investigators have to give justification why they have to exclude. That is also inbuilt in the Covidence system, but it's not there in the screening part. Screening, you can just say yes or no and carry on. But for the second step, which is the eligibility assessment, inclusion or exclusion, you have to tag the reason why you are excluding, and that will appear in the final Prisma flow chart. So the reason for exclusion is important, and then if author A gives one reason and author B gives another reason, again that is a discrepancy that has to be resolved by the third investigator. So it's the same case, but I don't think there will be place for or space for providing all the list of excluded studies. That if there is 40, you cannot give a chart there. So all systematic reviews with meta-analysis will have a chance for the authors to submit the whole manuscript as well as what we call a supplementary material. The supplementary material can even, I've seen supplementary material running up to 200 pages in some. So you can provide, include in the supplementary material and explain the reasons why, and it has to be done. It has to be provided as a supplementary material. So this is what the peer reviewers are going to look. And included studies, yes, it might be minimal, but included studies, we expect them to give, you won't say reason, but you will give characteristics of the included studies, and you describe those included studies and put in the form of a table. Did the review authors use satisfactory technique for assessing the risk of bias? Again, risk of bias assessment has been done or not. Question number 10. Did the review authors report on the sources of funding for the studies they have included in the review? For example, this RCT, like Dr. Murli was mentioning earlier about olanzapine or risperidone. So some of these studies may have been funded by pharma. So whether that has been reported in that particular systematic review. It's not systematic review. In that particular systematic review, whether in each see, the systematic review will have number of RCTs. Let's say example 10 RCTs are there. 10 RCTs, there are placebo controlled trials on olanzapine, risperidone. In those olanzapine and risperidone, have they provided the source of funding for those trials? Whether they have reported in those studies, it's about reported, whether they have done or not, it's not the issue. So when you're looking for this, it's very difficult, because sometimes those RCTs may have reported in the form of a supplementary material which you may not have access. But this systematic review should have reported, when the systematic review has been done, you should have checked the supplementary material also, is what the reviewer is going to look for. So this is the reviewer's guide basically. If meta-analysis was performed, did the reviewers use appropriate methods for statistical combination of results? For RCT something, non-RCTs it's something else. And if meta-analysis was performed, did the review authors assess the potential impact of the risk of bias of individual studies, like in the form of sensitivity analysis? Then did the review authors account for the risk of bias in individual studies when interpreting, discussing the results of the review? The next one is, did the review authors provide satisfactory explanation for and discussion of any heterogeneity observed, like Dr. Muli was mentioning earlier? If they performed quantitative synthesis, did the review authors carry out an adequate investigation of publication bias, like small study bias? Then did the review authors report any potential source of conflict of interest, including any funding? So these are things basically that they look for. So this is AMSTAR 2. Remember this. So once you're done, probably you would look at this AMSTAR 2, and this is PRISMA guidelines that one has to follow. When we try to publish the systematic reviews, one of the team members felt that it is important that the authors submit this PRISMA guideline with page numbers, and in the last column it says location, which means page number and line number or whatever. Then the problem we had was, when you submit, there are about 30-40 pages of your Word document. When it gets converted into a PDF after formatting, the page numbers will go different. So we had the difficulty to see how to go about this. And then we had to put a asterisk in the bottom of this table saying that the page numbers presented here are related to the one that is related to the submitted version of the manuscript. So we had to find ways to do this. So it's clear when you're writing when you're writing systematic, when you're writing the report, writing the manuscript, this is what you're going to follow. And there is for Prisma checklist, there's also I'm not sure how many pages, 150 I guess, 120, 150 pages worth of some explanation as examples of how the sentence have to be. And there's also a Lancet guideline how to report systematic reviews. So those can be used. There is a Prisma checklist just for abstract, how the abstract has to be. For example, under method section, see, can you check here, specify the inclusion exclusion criteria for the review, specify the information sources, databases. So there are guidelines clearly, and the peer reviewers are going to look for these things. There may be, for example, in this case, in the abstract checklist, there are 12 items. Whether the peer reviewers will pass based on about 7-8 points they get, or whether they want all 12, it depends on that particular peer reviewer, and depends on the common sense related to that particular study that they have conducted. Coming to journal specifics, yes, it is obvious that the editors will have difficulty because they need to publish so many articles, and the articles have got some page limits, so they have to have this word count, then reference style, numbers of references, there are limitations on that. The manuscript with suggested headings, so one has to be prepared to do to write concise version where, when they're submitting. However, with all the points that the Amstar 2 has got, and if they are unable to fit into that particular manuscript, they have to submit it as supplementary material, and they have to suggest that for lack of word count, or for reasons of word count, we have submitted in the form of supplementary material. Tables we should have legends, footnotes, abbreviations spelled out properly, uniformity in using decimals. If you used 3 decimals, you have to continue using 3 decimals only. The figures should have clarity. Some journals charge for color figures, so you need to be aware. So then we had to ask all the people to change it to, for example, Amstar will have yes, no, partial yes are the 3 things. So if they cannot give red, like a traffic light, red, green, yellow, probably they're able to give Y, short form Y, no, N, or partial yes, PY, or something like that. That's something that they need to be aware. Responses should be on time. If the peer reviewers have sent comments, reviewers have sent comments, then you have to respond within the stipulated time. All co-authors must have approved and signed cooperate agreement. The manuscript in general, how many material should come as supplement, which should contain how many tables, figures are important, they need to know. Information on protocol has to be there. The Prospero registration number has to be there. Then search dates must be mentioned. Minimum at least Prisma flowchart, quality assessment table, characteristics of included studies, forest plot, important subgroup analysis, any sensitivity analysis that is important for that paper, funnel plot if it is more than 9 papers you're done. All should come in the main manuscript. Style of referencing, how many references, one has to be very careful. Subheadings in the results also are expected. When we did this, chairpersons can stop me anytime. I'll just go through only few examples from our common reviewers comments that we received recently. Picked up few things. These are real time and real ones. Your paper seems to be similar to the one that has been done previously. So then what was the need for this study? Then you don't have to, the authors need not have to take a step back. They have to explain how they have improvised from that particular study. How far you have gone through the research I have mentioned, your search. Any protocol deviation you have done. Protocol deviations may be necessary. You cannot adhere completely to the protocol that you have submitted, because at the time you had something else in mind, but when you are going through the conducting the systematic review, you are slightly deviated from it. But that deviation, if it is necessary, that has to be explained and justified, and that justification should show that you are not doing it to in a biased manner. You are not introducing any bias through that particular thing because you want to find this risperidone is risperidone is better than olanzapine. You have introduced something there new. You cannot do that at later stage. So this is something that's being looked for by the reviewers. Scales used in the papers, discuss the scales. Sensitivity analysis has been asked. Information of how many selected for systematic review, that comes in flowchart, Prisma flowchart. So they expect the Prisma flowchart. They examine the Prisma flowchart and they calculate and they ensure that mathematically they're all correct. Can this study help comment on long-term effects? So some of these questions. Mesh and other terms to be described. Why other language studies are not considered. Combining ability of the studies to be described in more clearly. How can these be combined? The reviewers are asking this question. The conclusion seemed to be far-fetched and lacks direction. So it should revolve around the outcome and intervention only. So don't generalize it. The literature review is quite brief and requires greater analysis of previously published work. Presentation of the aim could be improved. What is the rationale for excluding registered trials that meet the inclusion criteria? So the authors said that these are not completely, the studies are not completed yet, and they had also returned to the authors of that registered trial, and they hadn't received any reply. So that's enough. Then please reference the Prisma flowchart. The flowchart is there, but there's no mention in the text to address, to refer to that flowchart. How many articles were located? So some authors have asked this. So one of the authors have said provide references for statements. That's standard. On supplementary material 1 provided, results are up to 1st of March. Why can't you say end of February? And then authors should comment on missing data and how it was handled, that is missing in your report. So what I'm trying to say, for example, the funnel plot was created using Revman or Excel. You have not mentioned it. So if you look at some of these comments, you see how meticulously these reviewers actually go through. Even look at the Prospero, look at your manuscript, which runs to around 30-40 pages actually, and they do the work. So we